began. "Antoun Effendi, he tell you I come here on purpose to do you good. I find out those gentlemens very wicked men, so I leave them quick. They want to pay me for go back with them, but no money big enough now I know they try to do harm to my nice young lady. She wasn't so good to me as the other nice young lady, but that makes no matter. I not stand for any hurt to her, sure I will not, milord." The meaning of this rigmarole, Anthony cut him short, speaking in German, which he knew I understood, and trusted Bedr didn't, is, that the fellow wants us to buy information from him. He pretends to have broken with his employers on our account, though his explanation of getting here to Halfa on their dahabeah is ridiculous, and that, having come for our benefit against their wishes, he's without pay, penniless, and stranded. A lie, of course, I took for granted, also in German. The part about being broke, certainly, but it's certain, too, that he must know some things we'd like to know. Could we trust a word he says? No, as far as his moral sense is concerned, but my idea is to bargain with him. We to pay according to value received. That might be bait for a fish worth hooking. Yes, that's our line. We haven't much time to hear and digest his story, though. The train will start in less than an hour. We shan't waste a minute. Without waiting for you, I began to bargain on the line I've just suggested. How far did you get? A good way, for I was able to scare him a bit. You see, he earns his living in Cairo, and I've persuaded him that I have some influence there, in quarters that can make or break him. He hasn't much more time to spare than we have, if it's true he wants to start back on the government boat. You know they take natives third class. My suggestion, subject to your approval, is this. In any case we give 1,000 piastres, £10. But if what he can tell us is of real use or even interest, we rise to the extent of 10 times that sum. It's a good deal for a beastly baboon like him. Remember, he has been doing services lately for which he probably got high pay. All right, whatever you say goes, I agreed. I trust to your honours, my gentlemens, remarked the beastly baboon in question, in a manner so apropos that I guessed him not entirely ignorant of German, after all. Thanks for the compliment, I responded gratefully. We shall have to talk here. There's no time to find a more convenient place, said Fenton, returning to Arabic as a medium of communication. Fire away, Bedr, but don't start your story in the middle. Begin where you took service with those Irish-American gentlemen. Was the gentleman's Irish? I never know that, purred the guileless Bedr, but Fenton brought him to his bearings. All questions were to be from us to him. So Bedr fired away, and there, within a stone's throw of the train getting up steam for Khartoum, we listened to a strange tale, as strange and as great an anachronism as that dark crocodile shape we had seen, except in the Nile country, where live crocodiles and many other dark things can easily happen any day. Blount's name, according to Bedr, was not Blount, but something else, well known in America. It was a name already associated with that of O'Brien, which inclined us to hope for some grains of truth in the chaff of lies we expected. Bedr said that in New York, years ago, he had known the man Blount. He was related to the American family who took Bedr from Cairo. Later, when the Armenians had returned to Egypt, Blount had come with them for a rest cure. He had engaged Bedr as a dragoman, and, on leaving, had asked for Bedr's card. That was years ago, and nothing had been heard from him since. But before the Laconia was due to arrive, Bedr had received a telegram from Blount instructing him to meet the ship, and wire to Paris whether Miss Gilder of New York and a Mrs. Jones were on board with a party. Blount knew that Bedr had seen Miss Gilder as a child, and might now be able to recognize her. On the day in New York when a block in traffic had given a glimpse of the little girl in a motor car with her father, Bedr and Blount had been together. As soon as possible after Bedr's reply, Blount and another man, who called himself Hanna, had arrived in Cairo. Bedr knew that they had a fixed theory in regard to the young lady who passed as Miss Gilder. Who they supposed her to be he could not tell, but once he had happened to be near when they were not aware of his presence, and had heard one of them mention a woman's name, which sounded like Esne. They accepted his word that he had been able to identify the so-called Miss Guest as Rosamond Gilder, and in her they appeared to take no further interest. Their attention was concentrated on Mrs. Jones and the lady who, according to their belief, was but posing as Miss Gilder. Apparently they imagined her to be quite another person, one whom they had taken a great deal of trouble to reach. Also they had an idea that Mrs. Jones possessed something of which they were anxious to get hold. It was a something which ought to be theirs, and they had been after it for years, but she had contrived to hide herself in it until lately. Why he had been told to guide the two younger ladies to the House of Crocodiles, Bedr pretended not to know. Perhaps, only perhaps, Blount and his companion, Hannah, wished to kidnap the one we call Miss Gilder, and they called Esney. But good, kind Bedr had never dreamed that they meant any real harm. There had been a plan of some sort for that night. Blount and Hannah were to arrive at the House of the Crocodile for a close look at the young ladies, when the latter had gone to sleep under the influence of the hasheesh they intended to smoke. But the two gentlemen had not kept the appointment. At first Bedr had not understood why, and had not known what to do. And afterward, of course, when he had heard of the row in the street, which had caused the closing of the house for many tedious hours, he had guessed. And later, when he learned that poor Mr. Blount lay wounded in a hospital, it had all become clear. Mr. Hannah, who seemed to work under Mr. Blount's orders, had not been able to act alone. Then, as to all the travelling up the Nile, Bedr had never been told why his gentlemen made the journey. Every one who came to Egypt went up the Nile, only he had been instructed to find out always where we were, and to arrange their arrival at about the same time. At Medinet they had not camped, or gone to a hotel, but had stayed in the house of a friend of Bedr's. It was convenient, though not as comfortable as he could wish for his clients. The advantage was, that from the roof it was possible to see into our camp. Bedr had made friends with one of the camel boys who went to the market to buy the black lamb, and while we were away had found out which was the tent where Mrs. Jones and Miss Gilder, or Esney, slept. What happened in the night he could not say. He had stayed at his friend's house, while the two gentlemen went out. He had done nothing at all for them in Medinet, except to discover the ladies' tent, and also to buy a bottle of olive oil. When the gentlemen came home in the middle of the night, they were angry with him, because they said he had shown them the wrong tent. But that was unjust. It was the only time they had been unkind. Except for that, they had been good, and had given him plenty of money for a while. At Asiut and Luxor, they had been pleased with him. All they wanted at Rechid Bey's house was to get the thing Mrs. Jones had, which ought to be theirs. They had not told him this, but he heard them talk sometimes. He knew more languages than they thought. If they wanted to steal the young lady, they had never said so. When the plan failed, they did not blame Bedr. It was not his fault. They saw that. The Mahmoudieh had been engaged as long ago as just after Medinet, when the thing the gentlemen wanted to do there could not be done. But Bedr thought that, if the Luxor plan had been a success, the steam dahabeah would have gone north from there instead of south. It was because of that failure the boat had followed us up the Nile. At Abu Simbel Bedr had quarrelled with the gentlemen, because he had begun to suspect that they meant to harm the ladies, or to one of them. He had been clever, and got on board the Enchantress as they told him to do. He had obtained writing paper, and typed a copy of a letter. In America he had learned to do typing. Often he could make better money in an engagement now, because he knew how to use a machine. And when the steward showed him over the boat, he left the letter in the stateroom which the Arab boy said was Miss Gilder's. In spite of all these good services, which no other dragoman in Egypt could have given, those gentlemen would not listen to a word of advice. Bedr heard them speak with the guardian of the temple about going in before anyone else came to see the sunrise. And afterward they talked of hiding in the sanctuary. First they had asked him if it were always dark there, as the guide-book said. After hearing this he had put two and two together, and when he remembered what was in the note he typed for Miss Gilder, Bedr feared for her and Mrs. Jones. He begged the gentlemen not to do anything rash, and they were so angry at his interference that they sent him off with no more pay, nothing at all since Luxor. Oh no, they were not afraid of him, and what he could tell, because they said nobody would believe a dragoman's word against rich white gentlemen. People would say he lied for spite. But Bedr thought maybe we should believe, because we knew already that something strange had been going on. The gentlemen paid off the men on the Mahmoudieh and ordered her to go on to Wadi Halfa. They did not know that Bedr had slipped on board, and hidden there, on purpose to find us, and tell his story. A part of this tale carried truth on its face. But Anthony and I agreed that there was a queer discrepancy at the end. If Bedr spoke the truth, Blount and his comrade must have had a reason for wishing to get rid of the fellow,